We're now hearing that the average American family could be getting around $10,000 under what President Trump is calling his One Big Beautiful Bill. I'll break down exactly where that number is coming from. But first, it's important to know that not everyone's on board. In fact, quite a few Republicans are pushing back. We'll talk more about that in just a bit. So, what exactly does America get from this big, beautiful bill? Well, for starters, border security, national security, and about $10,000 in extra money for the average household. There's also no tax on overtime and no tax on tips. This could be a big deal for roughly 90 million hourly workers across the U.S., since now all that extra pay from overtime could go straight into their pockets. But all of this hinges on the bill actually passing. If it doesn't, the Council of Economic Advisors at the White House says we could see GDP drop by 4%, which could trigger one of the biggest recessions in U.S. history, thanks to a massive tax hike. And that's exactly why this bill is expected to pass. A few Senate staffers on my team ran a quick poll today. I asked them, "What time do you think the vote's going through tonight?" The average guess? Around midnight. Now let's get into something people really want to know. Is there something in this bill for me? The short answer is yes. But a bigger question people are asking is, who benefits the most? Is it millionaires and billionaires, big corporations, or the lowest income households? We'll get into all of that in a moment. I've got a few articles from today I'll walk you through, highlighting who might come out ahead and who might not. But first, remember what Kevin Hassett just said. The typical American family will see about $10,000. So where exactly is that money coming from? It's not just from the no tax on tips part. If you're getting $10,000 a year in tips, you're already doing great. Same goes for overtime. If your untaxed overtime adds up to 10 grand, you're earning a solid income already. So no, that $10,000 isn't just from tips or overtime. Some of it comes from the child tax credit increase. That's part of it. But what Kevin Hassett meant was that the total combined benefits, no taxes on tips and overtime, plus the extension of the Trump-era tax cuts, would all add up to around $10,000 per family. Think back to 2017, when President Trump passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That law let millions of Americans keep more of their pay by lowering tax rates. If this new bill passes, it would make those cuts permanent, and that's a key factor in the $10,000 total. Also, a typical family usually has 2 kids. That means they could get $2,500 per child from the child tax credit. That's $5,000 right there, already half of the $10,000. So yes, the exact amount depends on your family situation, how many kids you have, your job, whether you get tips or overtime. But the average comes out to about $10,000. Now let's take a look at this article from Bloomberg that just came out today. It says the richest 20% would get an average income boost of $6,055 under Trump's tax bill. Okay, so if the richest are getting that, what about everyone else? The article's headline says, Trump's bill is more beautiful for the rich. And yes, Trump, being a Republican, tends to favor policies that help millionaires, billionaires, and big corporations. That's because he believes in the trickle-down theory. If the wealthy get tax breaks, they'll reinvest that money, and eventually it benefits everyone. Here's the breakdown. After tax and spending changes from the Senate's reconciliation bill, the bottom 20% will actually lose about $560 a year. The lower 20% will see a very small decrease, about $10. Middle-income households would gain around $760 a year. The upper 20%, they'd gain around $1,665. So yeah, the more you earn, the more you stand to gain from this bill. That's partly because Republicans believe everyone should be working. If you have a job, the thinking goes you'll be rewarded by both your employer and the federal government. Now let's take a deeper look into that article. It's worth noting this is the Senate's version of the bill. They're still finalizing it. As Kevin Hassett said, they expect the Senate to pass it tonight, around midnight. Then it heads to the House. When asked whether it would be tougher to pass in the House or the Senate, Hassett said it'd actually be easier in the House. Why? Because usually when the Senate passes a bill and sends it to the House just signs off. But when it's the other way around, the Senate often makes changes before sending it back. The article also says the Senate's version would cost the bottom 20% about $560 a year, while giving a $6,055 boost to the wealthiest Americans. Analysts at Yale's Budget Lab say this supports the criticism that the bill takes money from the working poor to fund tax cuts for the wealthy. Why is that? Well, the poorest households are bearing the brunt of cuts to programs like Medicaid and SNAP. Meanwhile, those at the top benefit from cuts to income taxes and expanded deductions for state and local taxes, known as the SALT deduction. Let's move on to one more thing. Republican Senator Rick Scott of Florida has proposed even deeper cuts to Medicaid. But the Budget Lab points out that more than half the impact from these changes would fall on healthcare providers, not the people receiving coverage. They also assume states will step in to cover about 1% of what poor families lose in income. But this is just one proposal. More changes will likely come at the state level. Here's something else that made headlines today. Elon Musk is not happy. He lashed out at lawmakers who support this bill. In fact, he said, every member of Congress who campaigned on reducing government spending and then voted for the biggest debt increase in history should hang their head in shame. He went on to say that if it's the last thing he does, he'll make sure they lose their primary races next year. So Musk is basically threatening to fund and support challengers to any Republican who supports this bill. Whether that works or not, we'll have to wait and see. But it's definitely a bold move. Now let's take a quick look at this NBC News article, Who Wins and Who Loses in Republicans' Big Beautiful Bill. Winners, corporations. The corporate tax rate would be permanently lowered to 21%, down from 35% before the 2017 cuts. That's a huge win for big business. Losers? Younger generations. Analysts say this bill would add around $3 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. That means the U.S. will have to borrow more, paying an extra $600 to $700 billion in interest, which the next generation will inherit. Winners? Higher income households, especially those earning $200,000 to $500,000 a year, or those who own property. Losers? Lower income households. Nearly 12 million low-income Americans could lose health insurance in the next decade, with $1 trillion being cut from Medicaid. In fact, the Senate bill includes deeper Medicaid cuts than the House version. Another winner? Workers who get paid in tips or overtime. With those earnings now tax-free, they'll keep more of what they earn. But on the flip side, healthcare workers are expected to lose out. Less funding for Medicaid means fewer patients, fewer prescriptions, and fewer procedures. That means less work for providers. Fossil fuel companies are also expected to win big here. President Trump made that clear early on. But that also means clean energy companies and workers, like Tesla, will likely take a hit. That might explain why Elon Musk is so angry. So that's the latest. As of now, lawmakers are still voting. They're going through a vote-a-rama, reviewing amendments, voting them up or down quickly. Once the Senate passes the bill, it heads to the House. If both chambers approve the same version, it'll go to President Trump for his signature. The goal is to get it all finalized by July 4th. And as soon as we have more details, I'll be back with a full breakdown of everything in this bill and what it means for you. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more updates, and I'll see you in the next one.